What's up, everyone? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic, and I have a collection update for you. Finally got around to listening to a good chunk of the stuff I got in Florida because I got a lot of stuff. So this is merely one giant stack out of all the stuff I got. Now, a lot of the stuff is actually older, so there really aren't any new releases in this. Some of them might be a little bit more current, but I think as far as this year, there's really not much. So let's get into it. Aborted The Haemotobic EP. I did not have this one. I saw this in a used bin and I had to pick it up because I fucking love Aborted, one of my favorite death metal / gore grind bands. This is the one that preceded the Archaic Aborted, and it actually has some tracks that are actually pop up on there, as well as some original ones. As far as original songs on here, there's only one that doesn't appear on Archaic Aborted, but there is a really kick-ass cover of Entombed's Drowned on here, which I really love. They did a killer cover of Left Hand Path on the Coronary Reconstruction EP, I believe. A couple of live tracks on here, kind of poorly recorded, but pretty solid EP. Check it out. I mean, if you love Aborted, chances are you probably already heard this, but yeah, good find. Amplifier Mystoria. This is not necessarily metal. This is more kind of sludgy rock. Little bits of like 70s prog in here and 90s alternative. I'd say similar to a band like Muse, but with like some interesting kind of Yes-like tropes in there, and even some kind of Melvins-ish stuff. It's an alright listen. I actually had a couple tracks for these guys I got on compilations a while ago, and I really dug them. Full album, and this one, it was okay. There's some really good tracks here, and then there's what I thought was a lot of filler. This came out in 2014. It's decent. I'd say check it out. Form your own opinion. I thought it was just okay. Anthrax. Nice fucking EP. I'm not saying that word backwards. We'll just call it nice fucking EP. I saw this again in a used bin, and really the only thing that's on here that I didn't have that's not on Attack of the Killer Bees is their cover of the Sex Pistols' Friggin' in the Riggin', which is hilarious and fun because that's the kind of shit that Anthrax does. But yeah, not necessarily a must-have in terms of collectibles for Anthrax, but it's one I didn't have, and that's pretty much all it really took. It was like, yeah, I don't own this. It's by Anthrax. I love Anthrax. Let's get it. But yeah, pretty fun EP. Most of it's on Attack of the Killer Bees, but check out Friggin' in the Riggin'. It's a pretty good cover. At the Gates, Gardens of Grief. And this is also Grotesque's 1996 compilation In the Embrace of Evil, which is a band that Thomas Lindbergh fronted before joining At the Gates. Now, Gardens of Grief part in here is really cool because this is definitely a much more raw sound for At the Gates. Like, they didn't really have a lot of the melodic death metal aspects to it. They were more raw, straight up death metal, like closer to Entombed and Grave and shit like that. Now, Grotesque, I think, is really interesting because it's almost blackened death / blackened thrash metal. It definitely has some early death metal tropes, like kind of like Pestilence and stuff like that, but there's a fierce black metal element to it, which I really didn't expect. I'd never really heard Grotesque before. I just knew that that was the band that Thomas Lindbergh was in before joining At the Gates. This is a cool little reissue I found. It came out in 2001 on Century Media, and I love At the Gates, so I saw this. I knew I didn't have it, so I had to pick it up. And yeah, really good stuff. If you really want to hear the early formative years of At the Gates and how raw they sounded, this is really good. And they did a really good job remastering both these, so they have a very nice full sound. Definitely check this out. At War Infidel. I picked this up because I know these guys are playing at MDF next year. We already got our tickets. We're going. Figure I might as well check out one of the bands. Again, used bin. It's pretty cheap. It's on Heavy Artillery, which is a defunct label, but they had a lot of cool thrash bands. So I figured, what the hell. And this is really dull, unfortunately. This is like paint by numbers thrash metal / speed metal. Just not a lot of interesting riffs or hooks. The vocals in this are particularly bad. They're very flat. They're kind of just a standard grunt. Some decent leads here and there, but it's just really just bland. It feels really generic, and it doesn't feel like a lot of heart went into this one. I still want to check out some of their earlier stuff because I've heard from people that their earlier albums were actually really good, and I don't want this to be the only thing I judge the band on because I didn't really care for this. So I'm going to look for those if I can find them for a reasonable price. But yeah, this one, I mean, check it out, form your own opinion again, but I didn't dig it. Benediction, the Grotesque / Ashen Epitaph. I actually already own this. It just came on a 2-disc bundle for one of their early albums that they reissued. But I saw this, and this is an original copy on Nuclear Blast USA. So I got the old Nuclear Blast logo on there, and it's like, well, why not own the original? And this is some really solid stuff from Benediction. You know, super early death metal band. Got to see them in Maryland Death Fest. They were absolutely killer. And I just pretty much just wanted this one. I already have the songs. I know they're fucking awesome. The live tracks on here are really good too. Just solid band. Benediction fucking rules. It's pretty much all I really need to say. Check it out. Blood Feast, Chopping Block Blues. This is actually a reissue from the original album, which I believe came out in '89. This was reissued in 2002 on New Renaissance Records. Again, this is another band that I've been meaning to check out. I've heard a lot about, and it's straight up Slayer worship, which is awesome. Actually, the production is kind of similar to Rain and Blood. It has that very raw analog sound that you kind of associate with Rick Rubin. And musically, they're very straightforward thrash metal. Some keyboards scattered in there that come off a little bit cheesy. They really don't add too much to it. And occasionally, sometimes the vocal cadences don't match up with the music. But for the most part, this is a pretty solid band. I keep hearing about their first album and how good it is. I haven't yet to really sit down and jam it, and I'd like to actually get a physical copy of it, but that shit's pretty damn expensive on Amazon, and I haven't even checked Discogs because, well, I imagine the prices are similar. But I found this one for a pretty good price in Florida, and I dig it. It's pretty good shit. So if you love thrash metal and you love Slayer, check this band out. Darkest Hour, The Prophecy Fulfilled. This is their second EP ever released. This band got thrown in the metalcore bunch, which I can argue, yeah, they kind of belong there, but at the same time, I always thought they were more of a melodic death metal band. And it definitely shows on this. This is a very heavy, very at the gatesy sort of sound throughout this, with some hardcore elements scattered throughout. It really fits more in the melodic death metal spectrum than I think it does in the metalcore spectrum. But yeah, this was a pretty solid EP. The recording's definitely a little muddy, and they definitely started sounding better and putting songs together better, like, you know, in the earlier 2000s, especially Hidden Hands and Assassination, and I still really love that album. But yeah, this is a pretty good EP. Again, it was pretty cheap. Used band, you know, one man's trash is another man's treasure, and I still really dig Darkest Hour. I always look forward to their albums. So yeah, this was a good find. Check it out. Dead Infection, Human Slaughter Till Remains. This is a compilation of all the early demos from Dead Infection. They were a death grind band / death metal band from Poland, I believe. This was reissued on Self-Made God, and it's pretty good, especially if you just want raw, kind of brutal death metal that's real kind of gore grindy. Recording quality is pretty rough. And when I thought the first half of the CD from the first demos were roughly recorded, then I heard the second half, and that was extra muddy, and they started bringing in the more gurgled vocals, which I didn't really care for. But musically, it's pretty straightforward. It's not very flashy in terms of gore grind. It's just riffy, fast, disgustingly heavy, very raw, you know, pretty much what you'd expect from them. I did check out some of their studio releases. This is the only thing I've been able to find by them for a decent price again. But yeah, pretty interesting listen. Definitely check it out. Death Worship, Extermination Mass. This is an EP from a Canadian blackened death metal band, and I just kind of picked it up on a whim just because it's on Nuclear War Now Records, and I know that label. They release a lot of good stuff, and this wasn't that great. Every song pretty much kind of follows the same formula. It gets really static. Like, you hear pretty much the same blast beat, the same kind of muddy riffs that you really don't make out a lot of notes or chords in there. It's just very muddy. And then you have these layered, distorted vocals on top of it that actually kind of remind me more of, like, Today Is the Day or, like, Godflesh in terms of the level of distortion on them. There's some moments in here that I think are really cool in terms of the songwriting, but it really doesn't stand out too much because it's just a wall of noise. It kind of borders on that war metal sound, which I'm still kind of iffy on. But yeah, it might not be for me, but it might be for you, so definitely check it out. Defeated Sanity, Passages into Deformity. One of the few Defeated Sanity albums I'm missing. I'm not really big on brutal death metal for the most part, or slam, or anything like that, but this is a band I still tend to follow because musically they are insanely good. Fiercely technical, some huge cryptopsy vibes. This is, I think, one of their better ones, too. This is excellent. This came out on Willowtip, I believe, in 2013. And excellent excellent songwriting here. Even some really cool hooks and some melodies here and there. One thing I gotta knock is occasionally they bring in the slam snare with that loud plunk that just instantly reminds me of all things Saint Anger, which I still don't like. And that's just a personal preference. I've never cared for that sound. But it's used a little bit more sparingly, surprisingly, so I think he's got just a different snare in that kit that he hits every now and then. But for the most part, this is a solid album, especially if you love brutal death metal. Chances are you might already have it because this is a reasonably popular band when it comes down to brutal death. Really good stuff. Definitely check it out. Destroyer of Light, Chamber of Horrors. Another one I just picked up on a whim. I saw the back of it, I saw the logo, and it was just like, fuck it, why not? And it is awesome doom metal. Straight up doom metal from Austin, Texas, like lots of St. Vitus, but there's also occasionally some growled vocals in there, which kind of add a little layer of heft. Sometimes they get a little too theatrical in terms of drawing out a song. There's a song in here that has female vocals as well as the frontman's clean vocals, and it feels very theatric, almost kind of like that Therion level, except with doom metal. But all in all, there's killer songs on here. So the last track, Buried Alive, is one of my favorites in here. It actually features a really cool Death Doom section that I loved. Really good stuff. I'm going to have to find some more of their stuff because I really dug this. This is awesome doom metal. I believe this came out in 2017, and I'm not entirely sure what label it came out on. Yep, this might actually be self-released. Either way, check it out. It's good shit. Disassociate, Imperfect World. Again, another one I picked up on a whim, most because I know this album art. This is, I believe, the same guy that's done some stuff for High on Fire, the band Core, and Weed Eater, I believe, too. This is just straight up grindcore. It kind of goes off the rails from grind, even has some goofy songs like the Whistle song, I believe, which is just whistling and blast beats. A couple of members on here actually went on to some different bands, Mutilation Rites. I believe the guitarist was actually in there, and maybe the bassist actually ended up in Magruder Grind, which both notable acts, both I really like. This is just really rough and really raw, and it kind of just doesn't stay very centered. But I like the fact that they brought in a lot of crust punk elements, and, you know, those songs on there were kick-ass. But it kind of just feels like a collection of ideas that didn't necessarily gel very well, but it's still a fun release. This came out on MIA Records, which is gone MIA. They've been defunct for years. But yeah, check it out. It's an interesting listen. Divine Empire, Nostradamus. Well, I'm in Florida, might as well get some Florida death metal, and Divine Empire, definitely one of the second-tier ones that came out in the late 90s, early 2000s. I had a couple tracks from this on a compilation. I figured, hey, why not? I saw this. This came out on Olympic Records, which is another label that doesn't exist anymore, and it's pretty good. It starts off really strong, and then kind of gets bogged down in, like, kind of groove metal, almost new metal riffs later on. But it picks up steam towards the end of the album. It's a pretty decent release. This actually features a former member of Malevolent Creation here. And it's very straightforward, thrashy death metal. Very fast, very chuggy, very riffy. You know, good stuff. Yeah, check it out. Not a bad listen. Dying Fetus, History Repeats. I didn't own this one. This is a EP they put out forever ago that actually contains mostly covers except for one song, Roof and All, which was just short and goofy. Lots of cool covers on here. Yeah, Dehumanized, Napalm Death, Broken Hope, Bolt Thrower, Pestilence, Cannibal Corpse. I particularly love the cover of Cannibal Corpse's Born in a Casket. I love that song. That was the first Cannibal Corpse album I ever bought, was Eaten Back to Life, so yay. Yeah, solid covers, great production on here. It's just real fucking heavy and nasty sounding. Good stuff. Definitely check it out. Excruciating Thoughts, Archaic. Yet another one I picked up on a whim. This is actually a self-released one from 2008. And it's kind of tech death, kind of brutal death. But it kind of wavers around a little bit. It definitely flirts with some melodic passages, even some kind of proggy stuff. Recording quality is really rough on here. I hate the way the drums sound. It has that plunky snare, and the bass drums sound like they're just kind of kicking pillows, which it's not a great sound. But musically, there was a lot of really cool songs in here, and I really actually ended up digging it. Yeah, so definitely check it out. I guess Fiercely Underground band, I don't even think they're around anymore, so yeah, whatever you can find online, check it out. It's pretty good. Eyes of Fire, Ashes to Embers. This is like a post-metal, sludge metal kind of hybrid, kind of like Neurosis meets Crowbar. For the most part, it's pretty good. There's a lot of interesting vocal layers. There's not like an actual frontman to this band, I believe. It's just a group of guys that all contribute vocals. I think there's 3 of them. It might just be 2. But it kind of wavers back and forth between clean vocals and kind of bellowed growls, kind of similar to like Troy Sanders and Mastodon. Songwriting, it kind of varies again. Like sometimes you get a more post-metal side and like a real drawn-out song that takes a while to build. And sometimes you get a real like raw, sludgy song that's very similar to Crowbar. Sometimes the vocal melodies don't necessarily work and they kind of miss the hook. And it's a pretty long album too. But overall, it's alright. I'd definitely say check it out. It's an interesting listen for sure. And if you like post-metal and shit, you might end up digging this. Flotsam, Jetsam. Doomsday for the Deceiver. Been meaning to get this for years. I just never actually got around to it. And I found this. This is the 2018 reissue of the remaster. And yeah, this album's fucking awesome. Again, been meaning to get it for years. Just never got around to it. Saw it. Snagged it. Iron Tears, definitely one of my favorite tracks for these guys. Of course, we got, super young Jason Newsted on the back. Really good album, super underrated one. I don't own any of their other stuff, and most of the other stuff I've heard has been kind of so-so, but this has always been just a killer album. So yeah, if you've never heard this one, it's an absolute thrash classic. Definitely check it out. And finally, we have Gates of Slumber, The Awakening. Now, this is a reissue that came out on Abyss Records, I believe. And this is a pretty good album. I was a big fan of Gates of Slumber when they were around. Unfortunately, they've been defunct for years, and unfortunately, I think they even have a dead member, which sucks even more. But this was definitely their earlier, more raw sound. I don't think the vocals were as strong on this one as they were on later releases. But killer riffs. The songs, The Judge and The Jury, back-to-back, 2 of the best songs on here. Definitely jam those 2. And there's still little bits of trad metal that get in there too. So trad metal meets doom metal. Some really cool guitar harmonies that come in there. So yeah, if you love doom metal, definitely check these guys out. Sucks they're still not around, but find their shit. Definitely get it because it's awesome. Alright, well that knocks out another collection update. I'm going to get back to listening to a bunch of other stuff I got in Florida so I can make another one of these. But yeah, more old classic shit coming. And of course, definitely album reviews coming as well. We can't wait to get the new year started. We're already looking at different releases. So, yeah, already getting shit rolling. So, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, subscribe because we do shit like this all the time. Catch you guys later.